So we're here with episode 3 of Talk That Talk with Fallon and DLab, and this is the college edition. The title of this episode is College Sports and Social Justice. So we're going to be hitting on some topics, really having a good discussion on what's going on with college sports with this pandemic still ongoing, and trying to see how many of these institutions or leagues are actually going to get their seasons going for the fall of 2020. So you ready to go, DLab?
I'm ready to go, and it's a lot to talk about this week. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's a good discussion we're about to have. So let's get it going. So let's start with the Ivy Leagues. They just made a huge decision this past week, deciding that they're canceling all of their fall sports. And the Ivy League this year, when the pandemic hit back in March, they were one of the first leagues to make the decision just to stop their basketball tournaments or any spring sports they had going on, because they had to look out for the safety of their athletes. And then you started to see a trend follow after they canceled their tournaments. You then saw the Power 5 conferences canceling their basketball tournaments, and then March Madness just totally went away, which is something we hadn't even been through, and I don't know, not in my lifetime. And that's some of the most fun time in basketball season during the year, something you look forward to during the spring.
Sports period, not just basketball, college sports period.
You're right. Huge platform, a lot of money lost because that tournament just didn't happen this year. And then about 3 days later, after they made a decision to cancel their tournaments, you see the first NBA player, Rudy Gobert, test positive for COVID. So it's kind of like a trickling effect. And I guess the Ivy Leagues, you know, they have some of the best minds in the world who attend their schools. So you can see they made the right decision in the scenario the first time and just continuing to follow that suit. So what are your thoughts about this?
The Ivy League and also Stanford, which we'll touch on in a little bit, it seems like they're a little bit ahead of the curve. Stanford, even though they're great in sports, they're probably, to me, they're iconic. They're the best of the best when it comes to sports across the board. The Ivy League looks at sports very differently. It's a hobby. It's something that people do for fun. It's good to something to add to your resume, but it doesn't generate revenue at the level that the ACC, SEC, Pac-12, all the Power 5 conferences, Big 12, Big 10, that they need they need that revenue to keep athletics going, and also to kind of generate some revenue for the school as well. So I think they have a very different outlook, and it's shown in their decision-making process. They're not hell-bent on having sports. If they have them, they do. If they don't, they don't. And I think they've kind of followed the science and just made decisions that make sense. So it'll be interesting to see who follows suit and kind of goes the same route that they have. I think that they made a great decision, and we'll see if we have sports at all this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think they made an incredible decision. Like you said, I do think with the Ivy League sports, they're not their number one breadwinner. They have huge endowments, and we're going to transition into Stanford University, just like you mentioned. These Ivy Leagues, they have these large endowments where they have money coming in because presidents, former presidents, some of your CEOs of Fortune 500 companies have attended these schools. So they're always donating money to these schools so they can keep it going. So that's going to be critical. Not a tough decision, I think, for them to make, but probably the best decision to ensure the safety of their student athletes as well as their students who attend their universities as well.
The biggest issue that we're going to have with fall sports is if schools don't allow students allow students to sit in classrooms and have actual class.
Yeah.
How are they going to reasonably ask student athletes to perform in front of whatever crowd level that we come up with and travel around and do different things when they don't force or they don't allow the general population to be around other people? That's where the issue is going to come, because if they decide to have online classes, but they still decide to have sports, and student athletes come up with COVID, and God forbid, let's all hope this doesn't happen, someone passes away, You're talking about major liability and major lawsuit issues, which I'm sure, obviously you're more familiar with the law side, but I know that athletic departments and the NCAA are having these discussions on a daily basis.
Yeah, they have to be. It's something that you have to be fully concerned. This is an ongoing process. So in the coming weeks, we're going to continue to see how these universities progress and make final decisions. As of right now, the Power 5 conferences are deciding to still have football this fall. And they're deciding just to play in conference games and shorten the season a bit so they can limit the amount of travel. So I think that's going to be critical. It's going to be important, but it's still a slim chance. I don't see too many of these seasons being able to carry out or complete the entire season because it's going to be hard. The numbers are spiking up. The United States, we just hit over 3 million of positive COVID tests this week. And deaths, we're around over 134,000 deaths in the United States right now. So we're going to have to continue to watch this as it progresses, but it's critical and it's a serious matter that we all have to take seriously and keep ourselves informed. We got to be woke about this issue because your life can depend on it.
I never thought that our numbers would get this high, cases and deaths. I remember when they first reported it could be between 100 and 200,000. I told my wife, I told my wife when we were watching it, I had got kind of wrapped up in watching each press conference. I watched it for like 20 days straight. It completely taken over my life. So now I backed off of it because it was just too much. It was overwhelming, too much information. And I told her, these numbers are crazy. We'll never get to 100,000, 200,000. It's no way of that. I mean, we're looking at Italy, we're looking at Spain, we're looking at France. They were in the 20s at that point. And I said, we'll never catch them. Like, we have no chance of catching them. And now we have more than all of them combined, which is scary.
Yeah, we're probably like 6 times past them with their numbers. It's insane. Like you said, who would have thought that we would have had numbers increase, numbers where they are now? But not surprising, the doctors, like Dr. Fauci has said it from the get-go, like, take this seriously, slow progressions in reopening cities, states, just to try and back it up. And you're seeing states or like Arizona, California, Texas, Florida, their numbers have skyrocketed. In Georgia, we're not too far behind with our numbers currently. We're right there. The mayor making a decision to go back to phase 1 in Atlanta, and she's getting some clapback from the governor, Governor Kemp. We'll talk about him a little later when we get on Kelly Loeffler. But it's critical times that we have to take seriously and keep ourselves informed. So that's huge. That's huge.
Shout out to Dr. Fauci. I love him. I think he's one of the few people that's been honest throughout this whole thing. And unfortunately, the president does not like the fact that people trust his word more because he's been honest and he's been consistent. And we call him Little Ant around my house. So we're worried about Little Ant now. Little Ant said some things this week that the president did not like. So I'm pretty sure we won't hear from Little Ant for a couple of weeks, but hopefully I'm wrong on that one.
Yeah.
Let's phase into Stanford. So we're talking about Stanford. Again, the mecca of college athletics. Stanford, everyone who's in the college athletic world knows that they win the Cup, which is the award for the school that wins or has the highest ranking in all the sports. If you encompass every single sport, I mean, they have so many national championships, so many Olympians. I mean, their numbers are absurd. They're off the board. Like, no one even compares to Stanford. So when Stanford, who again, you mentioned earlier, has so many endowments and has no issue with funding, when they decide to cut 11 sports, I think a light bulb went off in my head. Like, something's about to happen serious in college athletics. And I have a former player who I coach who's in Northwestern. He is in the financial department, and he feels like the model is not sustainable for athletics. Paying so much money to coaches, not generating as much revenue through ticket sales. The NCAA taking a good portion of money. You get some money when you go to the NCAA tournament, but you don't get as much money as some people think you should get. And then you do some revenue sharing, but each school is on their own in some aspect. And he thinks that the model is not sustainable and that things are going to trickle down to the smaller schools or the schools who are doing more poorly economically. And he thinks that a big change is coming. So let's just go over some stats for Stanford. They have the most successful broad-based athletic program in the country. They're cutting sports to offset 70 million. You heard it right, 70 million deficit that will affect budget over the next 3 years due to the pandemic. And again, that just shows you the intelligence of their administration and their school in general to project looking forward how this is going to impact them. I think a lot of people are worried about what's going on now and what happened this past year. They've moved forward. They're looking at the projections for the next upcoming 3 years and what they have to do to offset that, to make sure that they're not in a much poorer financial state than they are in now. They're going to Determined in 2019, Stanford has one of the wealthiest endowments in the country, 26.5 billion with a B.
That's
dollars.
a lot of money.
A lot of money. Some sports dropped after the next academic year include rowing, sailing, fencing, field hockey, squash, synchronized swimming, wrestling, and men's volleyball. Sports that are being cut have combined to produce 20 national championships and 27 Olympic medalists. The success from these sports are a big reason Stanford has won the NCAA Directors Cup, as we referenced earlier, for overall athletic excellence for 25 straight years, a quarter of a century. They've won that award every single year. So let me get your opinion on Stanford in general, and then kind of what you thought about them deciding to cut 11 sports.
Well, like you said, Stanford is one of like the epitome of college athletics, and just they're the standard. You know, that's the platform for athletics you want to go to if you want to run a good, clean program that has a ton of money but knows how to use it. But like you said, which was a great point, projecting the future of how this pandemic could affect college athletics, it could be a situation where for the next 3 years, we hope not, but we may not have fans in the seats. So those are ticket sales, that's revenue from concessions, all of this money that's gone, possibly even jersey sales for kids, even though you don't see names on the back. And then with this new rollout, especially with the Pac-12 of what they were going to start this upcoming season, was the rollout and trying to get Silicon Valley involved and trying to, you know, basically have endorsements for these student athletes. So it was going to help or assist these student athletes to try and make more money while they're in or playing collegiate sports. So they could already start a base once they turn professionally, or if they don't. So that's all going on the back burner right now, but Stanford understands it. And it's just unfortunate with these numbers going up and increasing, California being one of those states that they have to protect their student athletes. Like you said, any future type of lawsuits, God forbid if a student athlete were to fall sick because of COVID-19 and die. And that could be a lawsuit basically because these student athletes, while they are over the age of 18, they're putting their lives on the line by continuing to play collegiate athletics, when at the same time, they don't even get paid to do this. Really, all they get is a college scholarship. So it's going to be interesting to see.
I have an opinion on that, but
I know you do.
I think that's another show. Go ahead.
See,
I'm sorry.
college coaches always do. But, you know, like I said, you know, you have the some people of the mindset that you're given this free education, and you know the education at Stanford University is very expensive. So you are giving something huge. And when you graduate from Stanford University, it's not too many places where you're not going to be offered or have the opportunity to get a job. You're putting yourself in a great position coming out, whether you continue to play sports professionally or not. But it's going to be a hard hit situation. But I do like the fact, and it's just hitting hard, that most colleges don't even have these types of sports that Stanford has. Rowing, synchronized swimming, you know, the different sports teams that they're deciding to cut to help their budget. But they know what their bread and butter is. The money they generate is coming from football, of course, you know, basketball, men's and women's basketball. And those are your money winners. Volleyball, exceptionally well at Stanford. So it's going to be critical to see what they do in the upcoming months. Very close to being one of those Ivy League schools, but they get it as well. And they're trying to protect their institution and their student athletes the best way they can by probably limiting the number of students participating in these types of sports so they can decrease the number of student athletes that are on their campuses as well. So I think that's going to be huge as you see and progress during the upcoming months to see what Stanford continues to do.
I also like the fact that they gave them a full year so that the coaches, student athletes as well, have time to figure out what they're going to do next. Like, what are your next steps?
Yeah.
Because to cut a program, and I think it's High Point or Furman, one of those two, and some Division II programs, also some junior colleges, have just cut sports instantaneously, like this year, right now. So if you're a coach for that program or you're affiliated with that program some way, what do you do now? We're in the middle of a pandemic. I have a lot of anxiety. I don't know what's next. I don't know if I'm going to school. Now I just lost my job. Now I just lost my scholarship. What am I supposed to do now? So again, forward thinking of Stanford, it just shows the intelligence of their school and their administration. We'll give you a full year to figure it out. We're gonna continue to give those scholarships so you'll be able to have classes. You'll be able to get through the season. You'll be able to figure out what school you want to go to, start talking to other schools. You can put yourself in the portal. If you're a coach, you can start looking for other jobs. You can figure out what you're going to do moving forward. We'll give you a full season to figure that out. I thought that was very thoughtful and intelligent of them. And I hope that those student athletes and coaches appreciated that.
Yeah, no, that is huge. It's kind of like a layoff, but before we lay you off, we're going to give you a little bit of an opportunity to find your next job or your next position, your next school. So that is important. And I'm glad that Stanford did at least allow those coaches and student athletes to have that opportunity so they can search for the perfect fit for themselves moving forward in the future. So that's going to be key. But let's move on. We're going to talk about Kelly Loeffler, one of the Atlanta Dream owners, and she took a lot of backlash this week because of some of the comments or an open letter that she wrote to the WNBA president, Kathy Engelbert. And in that discussion, in that letter, she expressed some of her issues with the whole BLM or Black Lives Matter movement and how she didn't think that it should be included or the names of fallen individuals or Black females like Breonna Taylor, who have been killed by police officers in recent months. Their names should not be placed on jerseys, nor should the Black Lives Matter logo be placed on jerseys, nor should it be on the court. So she took a lot of backlash from players, even the WNBA, really trying to distance themselves from her based on her comments.
They should. It's ridiculous.
And, she was saying basically the court should not be sending or have that type of message on the court. Nor should it be emblazoned on jerseys. And she was saying that instead they should put the American flag on jerseys because that symbolizes unifying and rallying around the American people. And I think that's where it gets lost in translation. Kelly Loeffler's platform, she is a conservative Republican, and no judgment there. People are entitled with their political affiliations, but she is a pro-Trump supporter. And when she got appointed back in December of 2019, when Johnny Isaacson resigned because he fell ill, Governor Brian Kemp appointed her to that position. And she said she was pro-Second Amendment. She was pro-wall, pro-military, and pro-Trump. So she said the right words in order to get that appointment to the Senate. And she's currently there and having to run again for re-election in a special election in November. So these words or this tone that she's given to the league right now are just trying to show that representation. It's going to be critical. And she was brave to say it, especially when she's about to run for re-election in a special election in November. So what are your thoughts about what she said in her statements, and how do you think this is going to impact her and the league moving forward?
I mean, when you find out that she's a senator, then as crazy as this sounds, her statements make sense because our president, he thrust himself into office by making statements similar to this. This is what that base of people, and unfortunately, we're in the South, we're in Atlanta, and I say it all the time. We're in Atlanta. There's Atlanta, and then there's Georgia.
Yeah.
There's more Georgia than there is Atlanta, though.
Yeah.
So if you're in the state of Georgia, her statements resonate with a lot of people. They agree with her statements. They feel similarly to her, and they appreciate her saying that out loud. So our demographic and the people in Atlanta might not like it, but there are more people voting who agree with what she said than don't agree with what she said. I don't agree with what she said. I feel totally different. Obviously, I know Black Lives Matter. I know the importance of the movement. I can't explain to you how sad I am for the travesties and the injustices that have gone on. I'm glad to see that we're trying to finally move forward. I think that if we did not have a pandemic, it would be business as usual. And a lot of these things would not have been brought to light. And I'm actually a little concerned that when we get back to NBA, we get back to NFL, people get back to working consistently, we get back to school consistently, that it's going to subside. And I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But I think the pandemic slowing us down, sitting us at home, us not having any distractions allowed us to get out and protest because we didn't have anything to distract us. We wanted to make sure that people understood that we thought this was wrong, and we don't have anything that's confusing us right now. We don't have to worry about going to work. We don't have to worry about picking the kids up after school, taking them to soccer practice, getting dinner made. Then we start the whole process again. We were just at home for a long period of time. So, but again, just to get back to Loeffler, I don't agree with what she said, but I think she tried to spin it in a way to say that she doesn't have an issue with Black Lives Matter, but she wanted to be unified, which is what that base of people wants to hear. Do you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. She is basically stating, or this statement, or this list of statements is definitely what her constituents want to hear, the people who vote for her. She was on Fox News this past week with Laura Ingraham.
She's on Fox News. That tells you all that you need to know.
Who has definitely been very controversial herself. You know, she was the one who told LeBron James and Kevin Durant to shut up and dribble. And you see Kelly Loeffler trying to echo those same sentiments when she's saying, like, politics should not be involved in sports. And I don't get how you can say such a thing. It's not really with politics when you're dealing with social justice issues. It's about equality and about what's right. And just trying to, you know, make the police force or just the interaction that individuals have with police a better interaction for the safety of both parties. And we understand police officers have a hard job. I never want to downplay that because it's not a job I took on myself. But at the same time, you got to be responsible and think about the actions you take, because like you said, in an instant, you could take a life and there's no coming back from that. And that's what you're seeing with the Black individuals that have been killed recently, whether it's Breonna Taylor. We still don't have any arrests in that case in Louisville. And then in Atlanta, you got Rasir Brooks. He was just buried a few weeks ago. You finally see there's no indictment yet because of the stall with the courts because of COVID. But that officer was recently given a bond. We discussed that last episode with Garrett Roth. And then other people, George Floyd, which just set this whole movement on fire. It ignited it. And, you know, sometimes I say Lil Baby in his new rap song that he has that's speaking on Black Lives Matter right now with the movement. He says something like, you don't want to like burn the whole country down, but sometimes you need to light or get a lit flame, just to cause a bit of an uproar to catch the attention and let people know, especially in the majority, people like Kelly Loeffler, that we need change and we need it now. And you guys have to help us.
We might have just picked up some new followers. I mean, you just got a Lil Baby reference.
Yeah, no, you got to shout out. That's a great song. You know, I like Lil Baby. I think he's a new age T.I., new age too. But, you know, the WNBA is 80% Black, and I think it was huge. You had big faces in the league like Candace Parker, Breonna Stewart. You had also Natasha Cloud for the Washington Mystics. They stepped up and said, like, they didn't like these comments, and they want her to sell her ownership interest of the Dream, which she said on Fox News she's not doing. But I thought it was even a bigger platform. Well, Renee Montgomery, who's a current Dream player, she stepped up and said, you know, she didn't really appreciate those words coming from her own owner. And she has decided to take lead from the WNBA this season to focus on social justice issues. And she even said, like, I think this is what's critical. We have to unify each other and have these types of discussions. I'll sit down with you, Kelly Loeffler. Let's have a discussion about this, because maybe something's lost in translation to where you don't understand what this symbolizes and what this movement actually means. It's not what the conservatives want to say sometimes, that it's mobs and, you know, you have the antagonists, the people who are out there making this movement seem like it's a violent movement, when that's not what the majority of Black Americans or people who are following and pro this movement are doing. They're trying to bring awareness. The majority of these protests are peaceful. So we need to continue with that trend. And I think it goes with the types of dialogues and communications we need to have with different races, different groups, different individuals, so we can understand each other. That's the only way you can try and make change and try and unify each other, is by just having open dialogue and being open to different ideas. So I think that's going to be critical and important moving forward. Maybe Kelly Loeffler changes her tone a bit, but I seriously doubt that. With that election coming on, she's saying exactly what she wants her constituents to hear. She's saying exactly what she wants President Trump to hear. Exactly. And she's saying exactly what she wants Governor Kemp to hear. You know, he's going to support her either way. So I'm sure when you get closer to the election, the special election in November, she will have the endorsements of those two individuals, and we'll just see how it plays out.
The irony is that she's saying that she believes less politics should be in sports, but what she actually did was bring politics into sports.
She did.
She said something that the governor feels strongly about, the president feels strongly about, and again, their base feels strongly about. So you actually forced this to become a political issue by what you said and what you stood for. So don't try to spin it and think you're tricking us. We know what you did, and you got your base riled up, but we'll see what happens in the special election.
Yeah, we'll have to see. That's going to be an interesting watch. Stay tuned.
Let's move on to our next topic. Iowa State's Rasir Bolton. He transferred from Penn State, and he left Penn State. He's a basketball player. I think he will be a redshirt junior this upcoming year. He left last summer because his head coach, Pat Chambers, told him that he had a noose around his neck. The statement came one day after the coach was suspended for shoving Penn State player Miles Dredd during a conference game against Michigan during 2018-2019 season. Coach Chambers' apology was in July 6, 2020. He said, "I've realized the pain my words and ignorance caused Rasir Bolton and his family, and I apologize to Rasir Bolton and the family, and the Bolton family for what I said. I failed to comprehend the experience of others, and the reference I made was hurtful, insensitive, unacceptable, and I cannot apologize enough for what I said, and I will carry that forever. I try and respond to mistakes I have made by learning and growing, and I hold myself accountable and strive to be a better person and a better coach. In talking with our players and their families, I've committed to seeking knowledge and gaining a better understanding of diverse perspectives and impact of bias in our society. I have much more to learn." So I like his apology. And I think I very seriously doubt, I actually know him. I don't want to say like we're best friends, we hang out, but I've been around him. I've talked to him. I know people who played for him. I know coaches that have worked with him. I very seriously doubt that what he was trying to say was a noose around your neck as if he was being lynched. But when you're a white male, you cannot say that. Actually, I don't even care. I wouldn't say that to anybody. A black male, it doesn't matter what the racial background is. You should never say anything to anyone about a noose around your neck. He was trying to say that he was playing restricted. He wasn't playing comfortable. He wasn't playing relaxed. There are a lot of different terminologies that he could have used to express that. Hopefully he learns from that. I understand why the kid would be upset. I understand why he brought it up, even though it's something that's happened a while ago at this point. But we're just in a time where if you don't bring those things to light, they can happen again. It's almost like a crime happens to someone when they're younger. They don't report it, and that criminal continues to go out and commit more and more crimes because they've got away with it.
Right.
So hopefully Coach Chambers learns from this and doesn't do it again. What are your thoughts on Pat Chambers' comment and also his response to the comment?
Yeah, well, I'm glad we have you on here so you could give some perspective about Mr. Chambers, because I don't know Coach Chambers. But like you said, a noose, that's just words you just don't ever use. Whether you're black, white, I don't care. You just don't use that word because we understand what that symbolizes. It historically has horrific symbolism to where slaves were hung with nooses for years and murdered. So you never want to use the word noose in any shape or form. You know, the way he said it, I think this comment came a day after he served a 1-game suspension for pushing Miles Dredd. And then you have Bolton, who says that's the reason, and previous words or actions prior to is why he transferred and left and went to Iowa State, where he's flourishing and doing well. But this is a situation even with his parents, you know, and I think that begs to differ of what, you know, Bolton and his family may have felt in that meeting when his parents went to talk with Coach Chambers to address the issue in the comment. And I think Coach Chambers said something to the effect that his parents were organized and had intellect, or just exactly what he used. He said well-spoken and organized. And he took that as to say, oh, well, blacks can't be educated and intellectual to have a discussion about something that you said that was bad. So, you know, Bolton said it drew his attention because Coach Chambers, he was speaking at the National Basketball Coaches Association summit or forum that was online, and he heard him make the comment where the topic was collegiate sports, and I think the current social climate and how that's affecting college sports in America. And he was like, wait a minute, you're trying to say this and give this perspective, but here you are still saying, I got a noose around your neck to me. So I think it just has to be with, sometimes people make statements, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're racist or they always have ill intentions, but they're just ignorant to what they're saying. And you have to understand how your words can be either taken out of context or you just shouldn't use certain words, period. So I think that trickles on. And, you know, I wanted to hit on this topic too for a quick second with DeSean Jackson. I think this is not as bad, but it could be close. Just with the news connotation, we see how NASCAR went haywire like they should when Bubba Wallace had a noose and the FBI determined that that noose was just randomly placed there a year prior and it was not an intentional hate crime against Bubba Wallace. But you could see the thoughts. People who saw a noose in a garage and no other garages had them, you would have some concerns like, what does this mean, especially in this climate and with Bubba Wallace having the platform and he's speaking out for Black Lives Matter. But in the situation with DeSean Jackson, I mean, we are all familiar with the Holocaust. You learn that in school. I remember being in 8th grade middle school and we took a bus trip up to Washington, D.C. And that was the museum they took us to see because that was going to be a part of the education for you to understand the type of bigotry that took place in Germany with Hitler and Nazi Germany. And that's just something, he may be the evilest human being that has ever walked this earth. But when you start a comment and you're thinking you're talking those social justice issues and trying to quote Louis Farrakhan and started with Hitler said, that's never going to be a good situation.
It just doesn't go together.
It doesn't go together. It does not go together. Hitler said, you're like, what? Hitler said?
You can't go from Louis Farrakhan to Hitler. Like
but, you know, some people believe that some of Louis Farrakhan's beliefs are anti-Semitic. And they don't agree with him because he is a staunch, you know, he's Muslim. He believes strongly in his whole platform and what he thinks, you know, the movement, which his party should be. So it's varied. That's a different subject. But, you know, some people believe some of his comments are anti-Semitic. But when you start something with Hitler, yeah, you're never going to win on that one. And he took a lot of backlash this past week because you got to be educated. And I think that's important. I'm not going to speak on something that I don't really know much about. Different cultures, I don't know what you're doing in other countries. I'm not going to speak on that. I'm going to speak on what I know and what I experience here in my own country in America. But if you want to read and you want to have discussions, it's best. You know, we got Google now. You could look it up. Or you could just talk to other individuals, people in the Jewish community to get a better understanding. You know, it even went back, it was some months ago, I think LeBron James was on social media and he makes a comment rapping some rapper song. And I think the song was called Jewish Money. And the Jewish community, that was outraged too, because they're like, you can't make statements like that, LeBron James. And I think it's just different cultures and the lack of understanding of what bigotry is and what people find offensive. Now, LeBron James, his statement on that, I don't think it reached a level to this statement from DeSean Jackson, not even close.
Not even close. Yeah, it's not even close.
But it is something that even growing up, I didn't even really know. You hear things, you say things. And that's just like when we get upset, when people make judgments about the Black community. And I hate to say this, whether it's like Black folks eat chicken or Black folks eat watermelon. It's stuff that you just don't want to say in front of Black people because to them, it is offensive. It's offensive. It's racist. It's racist. So, you know, you had Stephen Jackson, who's been just fantastic during this movement, stepping up and talking on the behalf of the Black movement, Black Lives Matter movement. And then he tries to back up and says what DeSean was saying was right. And I get it. And that was a no too. I think he went about 10 steps back on his platform when he made that statement. But I say Shannon Sharp made a good point when he was on Undisputed with Skip. He basically said that you have to put context around your words if you're going to make a statement. And, you know, I think DeSean was just trying to enlighten people or say something to the effect like people in the Jewish community, they know how to work together. And that's why as a community, they're very successful. In the Black community, we got to understand that working together, you know, supporting Black businesses, putting money into the Black economy is the way that we're going to grow and become better. And he just didn't say it well enough. So it's just a process. I think about education and dialogue. Since this hit, DeSean Jackson, you got Edelman from the Patriots, who's Jewish, who said, hey, I want to take you to the Holocaust Museum so you can see what my people actually experienced. And I hope you take me to the African American Museum in Washington, D.C. I want to learn more about what the Black community or what their ancestors suffered in the past. So it was a bad look for DeSean Jackson. The Eagles, you got a Jewish owner with the Eagles. You also have a Jewish general manager, and they're trying to control it and handle it the best way they can in-house. But I think it's a matter of education. We're out here, we're preaching Black Lives Matter. But if we want to truly unify this country and unify all races, backgrounds, socioeconomic creeds, whatever it is, religions, we have to have these tough discussions and just sit down and talk and find ways that we can work together to make this country better so we can be united and show a better representation of truly what I think the American flag is supposed to mean. So that's my thoughts.
Unfortunately, I don't think DeSean Jackson or Steven Jackson represent the majority of African American community.
They don't.
DeSean Jackson is a really good football player. He's really talented. He plays well sometimes he doesn't. And I think it's because of his decision making on and off the field. And I think this was another one of those bad decisions.
You're right.
This wasn't well thought out or well put together. And like you said, there's no reason to ever quote Hitler. Even though Hitler was obviously a smart man, he was a very evil man. And everyone knows that he's only known for negative things.
Yeah.
Against another race that did nothing to him. So to quote him is a very bad mistake. And then Steven Jackson, I have a little bit different opinion than you do on him during this Black Lives Matters moment. I think he was given a platform because he personally knew George Floyd, called him his twin. They played together. At some point, I don't know if it's high school, various leagues, whatever the case may be, they were in a circle of people who knew each other, and he was very outspoken against the police. But he was saying a lot of ignorant things throughout this whole thing, and he's been given a platform because he was a good player, but that doesn't make him wise with his words. And I think he, again, put his foot in his mouth, which he does a lot. So hopefully this doesn't, I don't know if he hurt himself, because I think he is who he is, and he's going to continue to say the things that he says. What I hope it doesn't do is hurt the Black community and our voice as we're going through Black Lives Matter, because I don't want them to feel like this is our opinion. This is two guys. This is their deal. Like, we don't agree with what they're saying right now.
I agree. I think Steven Jackson, he got pushed into the forefront because, like you said, his good friend George Floyd was killed by a police officer, by police. So he made the conscious decision that he wanted to be a spokesperson and bring attention, especially to have the officers prosecuted to the fullest who murdered his friend. Yeah. But like you said, no, and what it did take away the attention from Black Lives Matter, because you didn't see that in the news cycle. It was more so about this negativity that was running on the press. And like you're saying, they're not a representation of the entire Black community. We do not feel that way. And that's what you saw all around. I think it was just said so well, it's no hierarchy when it comes to bigotry. Bigotry is bigotry. That's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It is what it is. And we have to watch our words and, just be conscientious in what we say and continuing to strategize and how we handle this movement moving forward. So I think that's just so important. And hopefully we can learn. You say one of the best quotes I say growing up, you live and you learn. And hopefully this is an experience where DeSean Jackson lives and learns, but, due to his actions, he's going to learn from it, as well as Steven Jackson moving forward. So
I hope so.
Yeah.
Back to one quick thing. I have one quick thought about the Rasir Bolton thing. As a college coach right now, or a coach of any nature, I think coaches are in a very precarious situation, because you have to be so careful with everything you do and say right now. The student athletes have all the power. I mean, we grew up in an era, and I'm sure you can vouch for this, where you were cursed out by coaches loudly in front of other people, degraded. Necessarily, I guess degraded is a term we would use now. I just looked at it as I was coached hard by coaches growing up from the time I was 10 all the way up through playing, finishing out college. It was a very common thing. I think it built character. I didn't always appreciate it. I didn't always understand it. But as I've gotten older, I think I've learned a lot of lessons and values through that coaching. I know now you cannot do any of that.
No.
Camera phones, Instagram, social media, if you do anything that's even close that can be construed as negative, and again, I don't like the noose comment. I don't want anybody to think I do. I think you should not use noose at any moment. But any comment that's somewhat similar, that a kid can twist around or say or do whatever they want to do with it, you can get fired now. So you have to coach these kids with kid gloves. I think coaches are in a tough position, but it's actually putting the kids in a bad position because you can't help them grow and mature now because you have to be so soft on them.
Right.
I don't know if that changes anytime soon. I just wanted to make sure that was something that I got out while I had this platform to talk about it.
Yeah, I agree. They got rid of that Bobby Knight era a long time ago. And you're right. These kids have to be coached entirely differently.
Totally.
Or it'll be something to pay for, like losing your job. So it's important. We always have to be conscientious. Our coaches have to be. So DLab, this is another great show. This is episode 3, talking about college sports and social justice. And like I said, we want to continue the trend. I want to shout out Black businesses at the end of our show just to support, give a shout out so more people can support and know where they can get certain apparel. And this week I am shouting out Whitney Nash on IG. His name is Fat Boy ENT, PhatBoyEnt. Go check him out, DM him. This is his shirt I'm wearing today. We are not okay, which I think the expression goes well because we're not. And we have a long way to go. We're trying to work, strategize, and see how we can push forward and affect change in our communities. So I think this is a start. It's very important, supporting Black businesses or just businesses in general that are putting out good product. But we have to make a conscientious effort to support Black businesses in the future. I think that's very important.
I agree.
Yeah. So thanks for everybody who listened. Thanks for everybody who's watching on YouTube, listening on our platforms. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify. We're on Google Podcasts. So we're putting ourselves out there. You can follow us on our Instagram page as well. You got Talk That Talk FD on Instagram. So go ahead and follow us, look at some clips, and stay tuned. Have a good one.